You're listening to the Boston Greeks podcast with Ari and Foti. They've been bringing Greek culture online since 1998, and now they're bringing you the best Greek guests Boston has to offer. So grab your kafedaki and join us.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Boston Greeks podcast. I'm Ari, and I am here with my co-host Foti Stamos. Hello, Foti.
Yasu Ari.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. These episodes.
Yeah, always. And today we have a good one. We have a fantastic author, and there's so much we want to talk about, but let me give it to Foti so he could introduce our wonderful guest today. Go ahead, Foti.
Excellent, Ari. Thank you so much. And as we have mentioned in previous episodes, we enjoy bringing on guests who have distinct journeys in life. I'm sure as Greek Americans, we all have stories from our parents' generation, our grandparents' generations. You know, they're fascinating. And our guest today, as you mentioned, has a fascinating journey that we're going to discuss, and also a book that was published as well that we're going to also get into. But without further ado, let's bring on our guest to the Boston Greeks podcast, Stella Nahatis. Stella, thank you so much for joining us on this bitter cold day here in January. Feeling that we should be in Greece, but whatever. We'll get to that point. But thank you so much, Stella, for joining us. This is an honor.
You are welcome, and I thank you and Ari for inviting me to be here. And I have to say, the scene behind you looks like you're in Greece, so feeling warmer?
Something had to warm me up.
So, Stella, can we get a little bit about your background, your history, and then we can talk about what led you down your path?
Certainly, and I think I would have to start by saying why I wrote the book, because that will give you some background on me.
Sure. Excellent.
So for years, people had been telling me I should write a book after they would hear answers to questions. And the questions would begin with, how did you end up in the United States? I would answer with, my sister and I were orphaned. We were separated and adopted into different countries. And then they will ask, oh, weren't there any relatives to take care of you? Why didn't one couple adopt both of you? I would answer those questions. How was your experience as a child immigrant? And after that, I would fast forward and say, well, when I was 16, my adoptive mother died. 3 years later, my adoptive father died, and I was left on my own. At the end of, I would say, every conversation from that story, they would say, you should write a book. And that happened for decades. I did know I had a strong story to tell. I knew I overcame a lot, but I didn't think my challenges were that severe. I felt other people had more severe hurdles they overcame, and that I wasn't the one to write the book. And then but 5 years ago, after a round of golf, a friend who had met my sister for the first time asked me the usual questions. Why is she in Greece and you are here? So I gave her the same story. And at the end of that conversation, Maura said, you should write a book. That was 5 years ago. 2021, during the imposed COVID quarantine, I received an email from Hay House Publishing. And I receive their emails all the time because I read their books from books published by Hay House. And at that time, they offered a 7-day writing challenge focused on memoir. And so, of course, I jumped right on it. And after 7 days of daily instruction, homework, and collaboration with other people who wanted to write a memoir, the challenge finished, and I was committed that I was going to write the book everybody was telling me I should write.
Wow.
And that's what happened. That's how that came about, I think.
It seems like it was meant to be that this came about with the publishing reaching out to you, the Hay House.
Exactly. It was synchronicity. And, even though the book is about me, I do feel it's really, first of all, I have to say, I felt everyone has a story. And how many of us haven't heard you should write a book about your story? Or some people say, I should write a book. But this in particular touches people because it shows the resilience and that innate power we all have. And with me, I was able to access that power, that strength, that resilience at an early age, starting at 10 years old.
Wow.
And that is what I want the book to be about. Yes. And when I took the challenge, I had not written anything since college. And that's a story. I went to college long enough so I could get a particular job. And not because I wanted to be a scientist or a lawyer or a doctor, like most Greek parents want their children to be. So I hadn't written anything. And I thought, but after that writing challenge, I attended, everything was on Zoom or webinars. I attended lots of classes to learn the skill, the craft of writing, because I did want my book to be relatable. I wanted to be well written. I wanted to be helpful and hopeful. And I'm happy to say that's how it did end up being. And it was meant to be, like you said, for.
Wow, that's fascinating. So, Stella, now that we got a little bit about the reason behind the book being created, what about your journey that led to the book?
The journey, so the actual story, you mean, not the craft.
Your actual
not
journey.
My life.
Yeah, the story, because
Okay.
you piqued my interest now with that lead up.
Yeah.
So, and I won't give all the details of how it happened, but our parents were killed in an accident, and my sister was 7.5. I was 10 years old, and we lived. And this happened in the 50s, 1958. Our family of 4 had moved from the city of Veria to Thessaloniki, where my father would get a better opportunity for a better life. He had just finished serving in the military and was stationed in Veria. And so we moved to Thessaloniki, but the 4 of us lived in one room that we rented. And that particular night that our parents were killed, our landlady, we shared everything else, but the only thing that was private was the bedroom. Our landlady woke us up and told us our Theo from our uncle from the village was coming to pick us up and take us to his village. And we thought it was in the middle of the night, and it was early morning. It was still dark. We noticed our parents weren't in their bed because that we all slept in the same room. And we hurried up and we left. We got in a taxi, and first of all, it was our first taxi ride. In our environment, children did not ride. Well, actually, in those days, most children of our poor middle class, did not get the opportunity to ride in a taxi. So even though we were startled, both of us later, when we reunited, we shared the feeling and the thought, wow, we are in a taxi. Look at us, even though we were scared and we didn't know what was happening, because all the adults around us, the neighbors came out and they're all crossing themselves and wishing everybody for God to be with you. We didn't think anything. We got over it when we slid into that taxi. But going down the street, all of a sudden we stopped at a cemetery, which was not any big deal to us. Our school was across from there, so it was not anything scary, but the hour and our Theo's composure was strange to us. So we watched him and the driver go outside, and that we were so frightened, squeezing our hands. My sister, who had actually drew a line between us in the back seat and said, "This is my side, this is yours." All of a sudden, she came to me and she's right crushing me against the door, and we're holding hands because now we're scared, even though we were in the taxi. And all of a sudden, we heard this noise in the trunk, and we were startled. But suddenly, the sun came out, and we're riding down the roads, and people are looking at us, and we're thinking, wow, they are really envious that we are riding in a taxi. This is a little minds. But what was actually, and then people, as we're driving through the villages, these are dirt roads going from Thessaloniki to a village, 80 miles away, not miles, kilometers. And we're thinking, and then people are standing up. They're sitting, drinking their morning coffee, and all of a sudden they're standing up in attention. And with, again, our little minds are telling us they are looking at us because a taxi's going by. Well, unbeknown to us, in the back of in the trunk was a coffin, and that's what brought us to the village. We went, and then once we got to the village and we saw the scene that waited for us, you have to read that chapter. It was amazing because it was always a happy place for us to go. Our Yaya lived there, our Theo we loved, and parents had spent some time there while my father was in the military, and Veria was very close by. So it was always a happy place. But this time we saw a crowd of mourners that were all in black, and the women were in black. Men were crying, children were playing, and people, the adults were pulling them not to have fun. It was scary to us. So once again, we're holding on to each other, crying, and moving on with the taxi. More?
Well, this is very captivating, and it only for me personally, I'm sure Ari can speak as well, but it does now captivate us to the point where you're giving us enough details that definitely we want to dive into this even more through the book. But so that was the beginning of possibly what was to come, leaving and coming to America.
Yes, within 2 days, both of our parents were buried. Within 2 weeks, my sister was given for adoption in Caterini. And then I thought I would just be staying there with my Theo, whom I loved. And by this time, once we got over the shock that our parents were gone, not knowing what was going to happen to me, not knowing what happened to my sister, because it was in the days when people didn't explain things to children, and specifically to our culture and other cultures like ours. In those years, you just didn't expose children to death, to the cemetery, to the dead. That no one actually said, your mother died, your father died. No one. We just had to figure it out because we could see it happening. And so she's adopted. I'm with my Theo. And 2 months later, he said, oh, you're going to have new parents. I'm taking you to Veria. So he took me to these new parents. I was so brokenhearted to be pulled away from him. And when I saw the new parents, I thought, oh, I can't stay here. They were old enough to be my grandparents. And I mean, that's the honest truth. I was 10 years old. And to me, to have someone in their 60s was old. Now, and we're talking in the 50s. Nowadays, 60 is not a big deal. You have children at that age. But then none of my friends had people that looked like this couple. They were grandparents. And it was not a pleasant experience. A couple of months, the mother, was not warm and fuzzy, was not even really kind. But the father, I bonded with him. He was always defending me and comforting me when she wasn't so nice. And however, 2 months later, he died.
Oh,
and I thought, well, I'm not staying with this woman. I cannot stay with this woman. And where's my uncle to take me back? I won't go into the detail, but that adoption did not take place. There was a very emotional scene at a courthouse, and I left the courthouse with my Theo going back to the village, to his dismay, to her disappointment. And that was months later. Meanwhile, I attended the one-room schoolhouse in the village, and I was all sad. I'm thinking now, as an adult, when I thought back, I could not think or feel the loss of my parents. It's strange to admit, but it's the truth. And I believe it's because I was adjusting to what I had to be. And I was feeling, okay, almost not resisting what was going on. I mean, just go in a repair mode. Okay, now what's going to happen? Okay, I'm going to go to school. This is my new life. And then that was short-lived. Suddenly, Theo Pablo, my favorite uncle, whom I loved because I knew him as for years, he announced that I was going to America. Stella, θα πας στην Αμερική. And I was supposed to get excited, and I wasn't. But I also knew after being there almost a year, the chatter with the adults was, what are you going to do with her? What are you going to do? You can't take care of her. You had to find a place for her. The word they use, the translation is situated. Πρέπει να την τακτοποιήσεις. And I thought, and I knew it. I could hear them, and I'm thinking, no, I'm staying here. This is my life. But when he announced you're going to America, in my heart, I knew I had to go. I did not think, oh, I'm going to talk my way out of this one, because that's what they all said. I had to go. And again, I'm going. So he took me from the village back to Thessaloniki to meet my new mother, who had come from the States to adopt a child, and her sister and her mother. That's who was in Thessaloniki in this new place. The entire trip, I was hoping this was not happening. We're just going for a ride to Thessaloniki. In Thessaloniki, we rang the bell, and I was hoping no one would answer, because now, oh, they're high rises. They're not anymore. High rises is 4 stories at the time. They're not anymore. The small little houses. And as impressive as that was, even now I'm 11 years old, as impressive as that was, I wanted to go back to the village. We went upstairs, and again, I was impressed with my surroundings. They were different than what I was accustomed to in the village. We all lived again in a huge room, but still, we were all together. This had bedrooms and a living room and a dining room and a kitchen and a bathroom indoors. But after the visit, they all talked about what a wonderful life I would have, what a wonderful job thing my Theo was doing for me, and I can see me, because I'm 11 years old and I'm mesmerized with my surroundings, the objects in the room. But at the same time, I don't want him to leave. And then all of a sudden, it's time to leave, and there's another emotional scene that's again just seared in my heart, like the courtroom scene in Veria. I came to the United States, not speaking any English. I flew by myself on TWA to, at the time, LaGuardia. I hadn't met my new father, but I knew he was also older. Someone escorted me to this office, knowing now it was immigration and someone to receive me. And I looked at the 2 men. One was in uniform, so I knew that wasn't my father. And I looked at the other man. I said, oh, no, he's old too. And it ended up, he wasn't even my father. He had come. He was Mr. Kudrupis from Boston, the travel agent. He had come to take me to Boston. So the 2 of us came to Boston. Then I met my mother I had met. And right away, you just call them mother and father. That's it. It's a given. You are told that's what it is. Wow. And so I met my father. He's also old, and he was in his 60s. Going to school, not speaking any English. Now, my environment was only their friends, their Greek-speaking friends. So that felt secure. They sent me to school in the 6th grade, which was what I should be in, not speaking English. So, of course, every day I went home and cried because I didn't know what was going on. I opened books when the other kids did. I stood up. The thing that struck me was everyone stood up, and I thought they were praying. I didn't know. They were saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And I went home and I said, oh, we have to pray in American. But so after a week of crying, and I was also begging to go back to Greece. I wanted to go back. And I knew I wasn't going to. But after a week, the school officials told my parents they needed to send me to a school to learn English. Thank God. So we lived in Brighton, a neighborhood of Boston, and the school was in downtown Boston. It was the Christopher Columbus High School, and they had ESL classes. Wow. And thankfully, I learned how to get there on my own with, at the time, the trolleys. And I got there in another frustrating and unfamiliar situation. There were all adults in the class, and I was the only kid. And,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, however, I decided, I knew I wasn't going back, no matter how much I cried. I'm still crying every day now when I go home and asking to go back. But I knew it wouldn't happen. So I thought, okay, I am going to become an American girl. I'm going to learn English. And so in 3 months, I think it would have happened anyway. I was conversational in English.
Wow.
In 6 months, I was fluent. I mean, obviously, I had the accent, but I was fluent. And at the time, I didn't realize the accent was a thing or it should bother me. So it was fine. I entered junior high school doing great. I assimilated, I made friends, I was studying well. And then in the 8th grade, I had another hurdle. My parents decided to send me to Greece to help my aunt, my mother's sister. When I say this, these are adopted family members, because she was tired and needed help to care for their mother, their elderly mother. And I have to give a shout out for teachers. There was a teacher, my 8th grade teacher, Miss Muscatelli, who gave up her life. She was older and had not married. And I think at some point they couldn't get married. I don't know. But anyway, she talked to the principal. She talked to anybody she could for me not to go to Greece. She insisted I was a child that should be in school. That's not what I should do. And I was crying. I said, it's my duty because I'm the daughter and they want me to go. I'm 13 years old. This is what I'm telling her. And I went to Greece. They took me out of school and they sent me to Greece. And I said, my parents told me when I come back, I'll go to high school. I'll go to the 9th grade. She said, no, you'll repeat the 8th grade. You are not finished. It was February. Anyway, I went to Greece. And this is what I'm talking about when I say I found that resilience. I went there and I lived. In other words, I was a kid. I'm here to help out. I accepted it and I was doing, but at the same time, I was being a teenager. And then I also, as much as I wanted to be in Greece, I kind of liked how they were because I was American and I was treated a little bit different. So I think most of the immigrants feel that, of children anyway. So I did my stint there, which was really not necessary. I ended up having lots of fun. I arrived when it was Apokrias, Carnavali time, and I was having fun. Summer came, my mother came, and we came back to the United States again. And now I had to repeat the 8th grade. Luckily, I got Miss Muscatelli again, who was my mentor, and I had to make new friends. No problem. I did that. She told me, when I get to high school, you should join clubs. I didn't know what clubs were. My environment was Greek adults and a couple of their children who had been in the United States already, who had assimilated, and I was kind of an embarrassment to them. They didn't say that, and I understand it. As an adult, I understood it, but at the time, I didn't know why they weren't hanging around with me as much as I expected them to. But so I did go to high school, and I was able to join. I joined every club I could. I did well with my grades. But meanwhile, my mother was sick. She was in the hospital for a year, in and out, and died when I was 16. Then I was with my father, who, when it came to graduation time, he said, we're moving back to Greece. Now I'm an American girl, and I don't want to move to Greece. And so I of course, I put up a big fuss, and he insisted that was the plan all along. And yes, it was. I remember that they said, we're going to make enough money, go back and live in Greece. But once my mother died, I thought, okay, we're not going anywhere. This is it. Plus, I had dreams now. And I convinced him after graduation, he could go, and I would go to Greece in the fall. After summer vacation, I could spend my last summer with my friends. So we arranged it that's what would happen. However, while he was in Greece, meanwhile, I had applied to colleges. He wanted me to be a teacher. I wanted to be a flight attendant. So I applied to Boston Teachers School at the time, and which is Boston State, which became U of Mass. And also, though, I knew that the qualification, they only required 2 years of college. So I also applied to a community college without telling my father. But you know what? I did everything on my own anyway. He was not able to help me through any of these processes. So when he died, again, honest reaction, I was relieved. I was crying because he died. I think that's just like, you're supposed to do that. But I have to be honest. I was relieved that I would stay in the United States. And that is what I did. Meanwhile, I missed the first semester at the community college. So I decided to go to summer school to get the credits I needed and graduate with the kids I would have graduated with. And in order to achieve that American dream of Stella becoming a flight attendant for TWA, not any airline, TWA, because that's the one I brought into the United States. And yes, I did accomplish it, but not easily. Again, my perseverance and persistence. I went for an interview right after his death, and I thought, okay, I can go. I didn't get accepted. In those days, they advertised. It was open. You went in and you applied for a job. You went to the hotels where they had the applications, and then they would call you and you would have an interview. Well, I had my interview, and they used to tell us that if you are accepted, you will receive a telegram within 3 days if you are accepted. And I stayed in that house for 3 days waiting for a telegram, stayed for a week in case it was delayed, never got it. Well, the following week, they advertised for flight attendants, and I went again because I was going to find out why wasn't I hired. Who does that? I mean, I'm thinking about it as an adult when I thought about that. I went back and I had a different interview, and I said, I was here last week and I wanted to know blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, I can't tell you why you weren't hired, but I'll tell you what we expect from our applicants. I know you did well in school. You were popular. You had part-time jobs, but we want flight attendants who have been out and worked for at least 2 years out in the real world or have 2 years of college experience. Fine, I said. I went back to Mass Bay Community College, finished, and went back for an interview again and got the job.
Wow. Fascinating. So did you get...
Oh, God, Fatih.
I was just going to say, you mentioned your journey from Greece to the U.S. and back and forth, and then you become a flight attendant for TWA. Now were you flying around the country, all over the world? Now you're seeing every place, not just Greece.
Right. I actually flew international because of the language. They had just instituted a new program where every international flight would try, that was the intent, to have at least one flight attendant who spoke the language of the destination. So, of course, I stayed on for that training. I continued. I didn't leave after everyone out, after the basic training. I stayed. The 747 had become, it was new. I stayed for that training. I stayed for international training and qualified to fly to Greece, of course. Spanish was minor, and I used that language too, but I flew. Yeah, so I only flew international.
When we were younger, I don't know about you, Ari, but when we were younger, flying from Boston to Greece, we would go with TWA back in the 70s.
Always TWA.
I'm sorry, you were gonna mention something, and I cut you off as I usually do.
No, I was just gonna say, after listening to your stories, when somebody says you should write a book, I mean, they're pretty spot on because I'm sure there's so much that can be said. Obviously, people should get this book and read it. But I mean, yeah, it sounds, to my ears, it sounds like if I went through a tiny percent of what you went through, like, I don't even know if I could handle it. Like, I don't know if, like, kids were just tougher back then, but I can't even imagine my son, like, being thrust over here, thrust over there, going to Greece, going to another country, back and forth. It's like, it's pretty amazing to hear what your experiences were.
You made the impossible possible.
That's why I feel blessed that I was able to handle it and I consider that an inner power, that innate power we have, my spirit, that I was able to access that and handle all those situations. And some readers have told me when I say, I didn't think my challenges were, severe enough. And they said something similar to what you said, Ari. Even one of those challenges, say, for most people, is severe enough to overcome. And that is why I feel really good after a reader tells me, or I see a review that says they were inspired, because it's what I wanted it to be, not to hear the story of Stella, that this happened, that happened, that, wow, I can do this. If this child can get over this, I can do this too. And I feel those bonds, early bonds we have as grandmothers. I had a great bond with my yaya, and obviously with my parents. They must have instilled something in me. And some of it, I think, is in all of us, but we don't all find it at a young age. And we don't all, sometimes we don't find all of it. I mean, so many principles, the Hay House writers, Louise Hay, who started that company, she never finished high school, She was abused as a child. She came through a lot. And the principles she talks about, I feel like I applied them as a young kid without even knowing I was doing that. So there's something to that. The law of attraction that we hear about nowadays, I was doing it. I didn't know I was doing that. So somehow I did find it. It's like, no, I'm going to learn the language. I'm going to be an American girl. I'm going to be this. I was always getting through something.
And you did it all. You did it all.
Stella, it sounds like such an inspiring story. And, first of all, we want to thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us for, a short while, but to get a little bit more insight into this book. And what I want to say is, everybody out there watching and listening, these are the types of stories that we thrive upon hearing because, it's our culture, it's our history, and it's these types of people that add the stories that enrich our culture. And, obviously we're going to link to your book. We're going to link to all your information. But everybody out there watching and listening, please, pick up this book, reach out to Stella in one way or another through our social media, through email, whatever. And, this is an inspiring story that we believe everybody should know. Of
course. So. Yeah, we want to thank you, Stella, as well on my behalf. And this deserves a screenplay. I think that should be the next step.
Right,
But
I have heard that. I have heard that from Rita. So thank you both so much.
But the movie has to include up until this podcast, so I could get Brad Pitt to play me, if that's okay.
There we go. Everybody hear that, everyone?
Well, once again, Stella.
What we didn't say is the name of the book is Taxi to America.
Yeah. We will have all the information, but can you also just instead of people looking into the notes here, can you just give us a quick maybe where they could get it, best way to get it?
Definitely. First, my website is stellanahatis.com. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, in the North Shore, local bookstores have it. You can go to your local bookseller, and which I can tell you they won't have it. The book was self-published, but they can contact me and I can give them the copies, send them the copies. In the contiguous USA, I can ship a copy to someone directly. Beautiful. So there are several ways you can have a copy of this.
All right. Well, there you have it. Once again, Stella, thank you for taking the time with us, telling us your fascinating story. We highly suggest everybody check the show notes, check the links, get this book, support Greeks doing great things, support Greeks who have endured hardships. This is an inspiring story. I'm completely captivated after listening to you, and we hope everybody out there watching and listening will support, reach out, buy, whatever you can do. And once again, thank you, Stella, so much for being with us.
Thank you, Foti and Adi, and thank you for what you do, promoting all of us.
Thank you. And everybody out there, thanks for watching, listening. All the links and information are in the notes, and we will see you all next time. Thank you so much.
Yes.